Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Hewitt and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. And for those of you who haven't attended a webinar with us before, you can check out the training calendar on the Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand's websites for more details of events coming out for the rest of this year. So welcome today to the webinar Demystifying the Modern Workplace with Mark, Ben and John from the IT team. Before we begin, I'll just start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please just type them into the questions panel on the GoToWebinar panel and I should be able to assist. Likewise, if you have any questions during the session, type those into the questions box and we'll have a short Q&A coming up at the end of today's webinar. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording of the slides will be coming along to you at the end of today. And just before we start, I'd like to remind you that there is a short survey that comes along at the end of the webinar and we'd really appreciate any feedback, whether that's good or bad. So that is all from me. I will pass over to Mark to get things started today.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome everybody to our seminar, Demystifying the Microsoft Modern Workplace. As mentioned, myself, Ben and John are from a company in New Zealand called the IT team. We are a company that is pretty much born of the cloud. We came into being in the early 2000s and we exist basically to enable organizations to truly harness the cloud and make IT a meaningful and productive part of their everyday lives. The webinar today, by the end of this webinar, you will firstly understand what Microsoft Modern Workplace is. You'll also understand the non-technical benefits of adopting this technology. You will have seen a real-life case study, an organizational transformation from a completely non-Microsoft environment into a full modern workplace. And finally, we'll have a quick chat around where you are in your M365 modern workplace journey and where you want to be. So we'll dive straight into it. First off, let's talk about what is Microsoft Modern Workplace. So as you can see here, this is the tool that the graphic that Microsoft give us. It doesn't make much sense to me, so I wouldn't expect it to make too much sense to you. Just as a quick poll of the room, we're going to just drop in a quick questionnaire just to see where you're at. If you could just drop the questions in there, please, for us, Jane. Okay, apologies, I'm not seeing that my end.
Okay, the results are 25% none at all or I'm not sure. We are like, 19% we are licensing Office software through Office 365. 16% we have documents and emails fully within Office 365. And 31% we use Office 365 for documents, emails and other functions.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's pretty normal. Just as a bit of a note of interest there, with the full Microsoft stack, only about 20% of the full functionality of the apps and services that your licenses unlock are usually used on average. And we're here to kind of tell you all the other stuff that's available, which is pretty neat. Okay, so let's just go straight on. Okay, the definition of a modern workplace is an operational setup which has been professionally designed to meet both the physical and technological needs of both your business and its employees. Now, that's the official Microsoft definition. Whilst it actually says everything, in a typical Microsoft way, it doesn't say too much either. So what is Microsoft Modern Workplace? So it's really a transformational piece. And the key here is getting all your information, all your data, and all your teams into one ecosystem where all your apps and services, file sharing and collaboration work seamlessly with each other. And obviously from that, we get associated technology gains. Okay, so as you can see here, we have 6 different pillars, if you like. We have, first off, we have Office 365 and Exchange. That's basically the tools that you know and love. We'll go into these all a bit more detail on the next slide. Then we have Teams and Teams calling. As I said, don't worry too much if these don't mean anything too much to you at the moment. We also have Enterprise Mobility and Security. We have the Power Tools. We have SharePoint and OneDrive. And finally, at the very end, we have Microsoft Azure. And we're going to go through these one by one and explain exactly what these are. Okay, so first cab off the rank is Office 365. So for most of the users out there, this is basically all the tools that you know and love. So this would be Outlook that you use to drive your emails. This is Microsoft Excel. This is Microsoft Word. This is, some of you may use OneNote, quite a handy note-taking and organizational tool, and PowerPoint. In addition to that, you also get OneDrive, which is kind of your own personal storage solution. There are also a host of other tools in there, such as Access, Delve. Delve is kind of like a, if you like, a Microsoft search function, kind of driven by artificial intelligence. Doesn't get used that much, but can be quite handy. Those of you that are familiar with it may know Project for advanced project management. Publish is always a good one for document and newsletter creation. We have SharePoint, which is for file storage and a whole host of other neat features. We have Sway, which is kind of like a PowerPoint for the cloud, it's kind of a web-based version of PowerPoint. The difference being is that it's completely mobile responsive. It can be viewed on any device and will open gracefully regardless of the screen size that it's on. In addition to that, we have organizational tools such as Visio, and the final one there is a tool called Forms. This is quite a neat tool, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail later on because it actually takes onerous processes within your organization that may be paper-based, that are quite time heavy, and it can heavily automate those for you. We also have Exchange Online. So Exchange Online technically is not part of Office 365. Exchange Online is a cloud-hosted version of an Exchange server. So this is the bit that looks after your email in the back end. But to all intents and purposes, the two mesh completely seamlessly. So your emails are handled via Outlook. Yeah, the back end technology for that is called Microsoft Exchange. Okay, so the next cab off the rank is SharePoint and OneDrive. So SharePoint provides a web-based space where users can upload a document to immediately be shared with other people that need to see it. It links to shared documents or collaboration spaces, which can also easily be sent by email, making it easy for users to be quickly directed to exactly what they want to see. What does that mean in real life? It means that in SharePoint, at its heart, it is file storage. Basic file storage, but it comes with a whole heap of other tools and smarts in there, principally around access, permissions, and can also be shaped to look very much like an intranet. So it can behave like a website for your team. It allows people to have access to documents on what we call a need-to-know basis, so they can only see the tools that they need to do the job. This also has knock-on effects with increasing the security posture of your organization. OneDrive is the cloud storage service that Microsoft offers to store all your files securely in one place, which you can access from virtually anywhere. The service works like a traditional external drive, but with the difference that it is available through the internet and offers additional features. How does this differ from SharePoint? I can appreciate the two look similar, but there is increasing blurred lines and crossover between the two. But as a general rule of thumb, imagine that SharePoint is for organization of your organizational documents, and your OneDrive is kind of personal to you. So OneDrive could be considered to be, if you like, your My Documents in the cloud. That's not to say you can't share things with people from it. You can still work with other people with things that you're working on, but just think about OneDrive as being yours and SharePoint being everybody's. Okay, next one is Teams and Teams calling. Some of you may already be using Teams. In Microsoft Teams, teams are groups of people that are brought together for work projects or common interests. There's two types of channels. There's your standard channel, which is available and visible to everyone. So that could be your organization and your wider team, and private channels. The private channels tend to be focused and project or team specific. So if you have a one-off project that doesn't involve everybody within your organization, you may choose to spin up a private channel just so people can chat and share ideas and collaborate and share files and thoughts amongst themselves. It has all sorts of cool tools in it. It has instant messaging, sharing of documents, collaboration, and also video conferencing capability. Also, the ability to record any video conferencing is cool. And it also has a facility within that further that will allow automated transcripts. So it will intelligently write down what it is you're talking about, which can be handy when you're referring to your notes later on. There's also Teams calling. So that's the true unification of all your communications. And that basically means that your phone calls will be routed via Teams. That's okay. But I would say at this point, if you're going for a Microsoft out of the box solution, the Microsoft calling bundles can be expensive. If we were going to recommend Teams calling to an organization, which is, there's no reason why you wouldn't because it works great, you'd probably be looking towards a third-party bundle just to bring the costs down a wee bit. But in terms of unifying all your communications in one place, it's a great tool to work with. Okay, so enterprise, mobility, and security. This is another part of the licensing within Microsoft Modern Workplace. It's an intelligent mobility management and security platform to help protect and secure your organization and empowers your employees to work in new and flexible ways. This comes across four different areas. So you've got identity and access management, information protection, threat protection, and cloud security. So what does that mean? So identity and access management covers things like Active Directory, which is essentially allowing your users to have a login to your system so you know who's logging in. Multi-factor authentication, so you can get verification via your phone. There's also other cool stuff in there like conditional access. What conditional access is a pretty neat tool where people can only have access to your system if they satisfy a number of criteria, principally around what device they're using and where they are in the world. There's also some other neat features in there, such as threat protection, which basically is good old antivirus, and also attachment scanning, that kind of thing. The information protection that we talk about there, just skipping up one, is stuff like data privacy measures, such as governance around data loss prevention. I'm thinking along the lines of if you deal heavily in medical information, credit card details, that kind of thing, the system can intelligently flag when those are being sent out of the organization and either stop them happening or alert somebody to it. And the final part of it is your cloud security. So this is basically a whole heap of smarts in the background around intelligent risk assessments, regulatory, and also security around your wider cloud environment. Okay, apps. I'm going to throw over to John for this one.
So Power Automate apps. Power Apps is a service for building and using custom business apps that connect to your data across the web and mobile without the time and expensive custom software development. With Power Automate, organizations can create streamlined workflows, such as move data between systems, send reminders about tasks, automate tasks from local devices, and you can automate tasks even in Excel, computing data tasks there. So you simply automate repetitive manual tasks by recording mouse clicks, keystrokes, and copy and paste from your desktop. Online service allows you to connect to two or more applications, whether you're Office 365 or third party to perform actions to automate most routine business processes. You can create forms for onboarding, change requests, expense authorization, so it allows you more time for focus on other strategic interests.
Good job. So, and Azure, John?
So Azure is a public cloud computing platform, and it provides a range of cloud services, including compute, analytics, storage, networking. So such things as servers and storage, data centers, network and firewall, they come under infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, data management, database management, and business analytics. And it also has software as a service for hosted applications. So Azure can be used to replace or supplement your on-premise servers, and Azure is frequently used for backup and data recovery. Many organizations use Azure to archive and meet their long-term data retention requirements, and it's flexible, it's scalable. So with Azure, you can scale the compute resources up or down as you need, so flexibility there. It's economical. You pay as you use or you pay as you go. It is very open. It uses and supports any OS or most OSs, languages and frameworks. It's very reliable, 99.95% availability, and it's a global with geosynchronous data centers.
Wonderful, thanks, John. So, next slide. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it's updated.
Oh, perfect, thank you. I've had a strange message come up, apologies. What does all that mean in real terms? So we've showed you the tools, but what can you actually do with them? What we're going to do now is just quickly skim through some of the challenges that you as IT coordinators or interested people for your organizations will see across your teams that Microsoft Modern Workplace can help fix. So the first one, what we've called disparate communication channels. This is where employees communicate through a variety of different channels, which enables messages to get lost in translation. There's limited visibility and a lack of control. Now, this is something that we see quite a lot. You'll have your team communicating with each other via paper. They may use free versions of Slack, even WhatsApp we've seen, Facebook Messenger. And this creates what we call a culture of shadow IT. And this is where your team are using tools and services that you as the site organizer have no visibility of. And whilst it allows your team to get their job done, they're not doing it in a terribly productive or efficient way. What Microsoft Teams allows us to do is actually put all those together onto one platform, which allows everyone to work towards a common purpose, if you like. So it does away with all those what we call disparate communication channels. Okay, the next one is standalone platforms and tools. So standalone platforms, business management platforms are implemented that have very little or no integration and automation with each other. This makes the risk of error high and increases workload. What do we mean here? If you have no integration between all the various apps that you use to get your work done, this creates additional work. And I'm sure there's quite a few of you on the call today that have different tools that you use to get your everyday tasks done, where you physically have to export data from one tool and upload it into another. This introduces duplication of effort, unnecessary workload, wastes of time, replication of data, and most importantly, that physical changeover where you're having to try and shoehorn data from one app into another and try and make them talk to each other via things like Excel. That increases the chances of erroring, because the more you handle your data, the more likely errors are to creep in. So what we're looking for here is a tool that would allow everything to integrate and talk to each other, which can be done via some pretty neat scripting. But yeah, it's just something that needs to be something that you need to be aware of. Also, something that would be quite useful would be if you, for instance, have one application that everybody uses that sits on one device within your organization. We can use something like Azure to virtualize that device so everyone can access it. Okay, so data and team silos. What do we mean by this? When teams work in silos, this is where they kind of put up the walls and have tunnel vision and only concentrate on the work that they're doing, which is okay, but it gives you limited visibility to other areas of the business. When data is stored in numerous locations and access is restricted due to the setup, this can cause a number of potential issues. Firstly, you may have teams working in multiple areas doing the same data crunching, which can be a danger. So effectively, you've got team A, team B, team C. Team A and C could effectively be working on the same data set and doing the same things. By a bit more collaboration and a bit of a visibility across the playing field, one team could be owning data that could be valuable to others in the organization, and it would actually prevent any repetition. Similarly, working in isolation does prevent and can prevent organizational innovation. So what I mean by that is you do get a tendency within team silos for teams to actually say, this is the way it's always been done, this is the way it's always going to be done. Whereas if you see how other teams work, that's when the innovation and ideas and the cross-thinking and sharing of ideas really happens. And that's really what Microsoft Modern Workplace is all about. It's all about that collaboration and sharing. Okay, so hardware. So this can be a challenge, particularly in older organizations where the hardware is a wee bit older, where desktop PCs are commonly used. Not all employees will have access to laptops or tablets, which can disable remote working. So desktop PCs are quite bad for a work anywhere flexible working model, because obviously you'll appreciate at the end of the day, you can't unplug your desktop PC, tuck it under your arm and take it home. If you want to fully embrace a flexible work anywhere environment, laptops and mobile devices are much better. Work anywhere means that your team have greater freedom to work anywhere, and they're also very good for disaster recovery. As we've discovered in the last couple of days here in New Zealand, snap lockdowns can catch out users who do not take their devices home with them. So having your device with you at all times can be handy. And also, if we look at the security aspect of Microsoft Modern Workplace, effectively your laptop becomes your trusted device. So this is one of the criteria around the conditional access that I mentioned before. So effectively, it makes your organization much more secure. That said, what happens if you do get caught out without a device? Remember, the licensing for Microsoft Office allows up to 5 devices to have full Office apps on them per license. So it is possible for users to utilize a trusted device to get up and running quickly. Also, don't forget that with all the apps that Microsoft have for your desktop, there are also all web versions of these. So there's what we call the OWA, the Outlook Web Access, and also web versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all those. Generally, you will find that with the web versions, there's slightly less functionality than the desktop version, as to be expected, but they are pretty good and they can get you going and keep you 100% productive, even when you don't have access to a device. Okay, technology. The technology you have implemented has scalable limitations and does not completely meet the needs of your employees. What we're driving at here is those of you that have an on-premise infrastructure. And by that, I would mean on-site servers, NAS storage devices, that kind of thing. Now, physical hardware has two challenges. Firstly, it's difficult and costly to upgrade. You'd actually need a physical person to come on site and physically do things to the device to upgrade it. It's an expensive piece of kit that does need regular updating, probably every 3 to 5 years. You'd be looking at upgrading or updating your server. And thirdly, from a disaster recovery point of view, if you have an on-prem server and you do have a disaster recovery situation where you lose access to your building and your server, your data is effectively shut off from you. So what we're looking at here, the obvious solution would be something like Microsoft Azure, where we virtualize your server environment or your infrastructure and pop it up in the cloud. When it's up there, it's completely scalable, infinitely scalable, and can be molded to organizational need. And what do I mean by that? That effectively means that we can add and remove resource at will on the fly. So, for example, if you know that you need to put an extra application on your server, or you're getting a lot of new employees and you need to add some resource, that can be done for you instantly. Similarly, and this is really appealing to NGOs, is that when it's not in use, it can be switched off. The Azure model is a pay-as-you-go model. So if you don't ever use your data on the weekend, you can simply power the servers down and you don't pay for them. The other cool thing is that Microsoft currently make available a donation model for not-for-profits, which allows you to access a certain number of credits every year to be spent in the Azure environment. So if your needs are fairly simple, you could have a situation where your Microsoft Azure credits completely pay for your infrastructure and you won't actually see a penny more investment, which is a pretty neat position to be in. Okay, where are we going to next? Okay, so the next one is security. The challenge with security is always been here, and unfortunately in the 21st century, the challenges around our data and our security and making sure we have good stewardship over our environment only gets more and more difficult as time goes on. A lot of situations arise where organizations have limited or no device or cybersecurity management, which puts businesses at risk in the event of a breach. Now, the obvious solution here, if you remember going back to our 6 pillars of Microsoft Modern Workplace, enterprise mobility and security. And there is a whole raft of tools in there that will help us keep safe, secure, and keep an eye on our stuff and our data. A couple I'm going to talk about. The first one would be Azure Active Directory. This allows a safeguard over user credentials and allows people to connect securely to the apps and the data they need to do their work. So if you can imagine, this does the same job as your old domain controller used to on your server. It's a neat way of logging in. It's the old username and password thing. And also this can be used in tandem with what you call MFA, multi-factor authentication. I'm sure a number of you out there, if you don't use it already, probably use it for things like your banking and access to certain financial sites, that kind of thing. That's all comes as part of the bundle and can be completely and very easily enabled for either senior leadership, certain individuals such as finance functions, or you can roll it out across your entire business. There's also conditional access. And as I mentioned earlier, this will only allow access to the system if you satisfy a set of prerequisites. So for instance, if the system detected that someone was using your username and login, but they were trying to log in from Russia, and we knew that it was only users from Australia and New Zealand that were accessing the system, it would be an automatic lockout, even if the credentials were correct. Similarly, if someone's using the device from an unusual location, such as their home, it can be programmed to issue an MFA challenge. And finally, things like your office environment can be designated as a trusted location. So you know that anybody trying to log in from your office is going to be completely okay. Next part of it, there's stuff like Intune in there. Intune is a pretty neat tool that allows you to manage your devices from one central point. So this allows you to make sure that everybody only has access to the tools they need on their device. People cannot install unusual applications or games or anything like that. Literally, people only have on there the stuff they need to do their work. Similarly, you can enable things like remote wipe. So in the event of a laptop being stolen or misplaced, you can actually completely clear the data off that machine and render it unusable. We also have some smarts in there around things like data loss prevention, and that involves intelligent scanning of communications to prevent leakage of confidential data. And that involves things like national health numbers, medical information, credit card details, all those sorts of things that you don't want to get out. And also you need to keep a very tight rein on what's being done with them. And there's a whole heap of tools and services in there that you can set up to actually keep that data safe. In addition to that, we also have threat protection, good old Windows Defender antivirus, where virus definitions are updated daily to make sure that your systems are kept safe, and also advanced threat protection. Advanced threat protection is a tool that Microsoft uses where it intelligently scans any incoming attachments on emails and actually takes them away before they even reach your inbox and opens them in a safe environment. If they are malicious, it just dumps them. If they're safe, it will just box them back up and give them to you. Finally, for the Azure environment, the cloud security, there's all sorts of neat tools that you can go in if you want to around behavioral analytics, risk assessments, deep data protection, and threat protection. And also not forgetting that if you have your infrastructure in the cloud, that generally is more secure than an on-premise solution, simply because you have no physical hardware that can be lost, stolen, or destroyed in any way. Okay, Ben, I'm going to throw over to you now.
Thanks, Mark. So this is just really setting the scene. So we've got a case study around our adoption to Microsoft 365 and our journey through the services. So we started quite a way back. So can you just jump to the next slide, please?
Yeah, sorry, I just.
You're right.
Bit of a finger spasm there. Apologies.
Right. So how we started. So the IT team's cloud journey will be different to a lot of organisations. For one, we started with a bit of a push with a large Canterbury earthquake in 2011, and that means we couldn't access a server that held our data, and it means we needed to quickly find a solution, and the cloud presented lots of things, licensing, mobility, and just general accessibility that we didn't have through an Exchange server. Thankfully, the technology has evolved quite a lot though and matured, because not everything was great about the cloud back in 2011. So at the time, we had a variety of tools. We had Yammer for sort of notifications relevant to some of the team. We used Skype for Business for chat, a file server, and Exchange, as we touched on it, until we jumped over to Office 365. What that means is we had lots of data sources, we had lots of licensing and touch points that people had to manage. So a quick example is we could receive a communication via email, a Yammer message or a Skype message, and you had to watch all those channels of communication, which isn't effective for any business. Just doing this next one, thank you. So the journey to the cloud for us. So we managed to jump in with an email side, but that was just starting to get into Office 365. And so our adoption of the tools was pretty progressive. We jumped in at sort of the bleeding edge. And as I mentioned, that sort of presented a few challenges as the tools were really in their infancy. So OneDrive, we tried to jump into OneDrive in 2014 from a file server, but what we found is it really wasn't business ready. We had syncing issues and a frustrating experience. Jump forward to 2016, we tried it again, and that was presented as OneDrive for Business and SharePoint, and they sort of amalgamated as a tool, and that we had some success, and we found that it was a good way home for us, but really it was used for raw storage. It wasn't what a modern SharePoint is with smarts, hubs, and being able to find your content easily. Around the same time, we had a frustrating experience with Skype. that we use to connect our region. So we would have sort of a stand up with our teams and regular touch point, but the experience is pretty poor, and we transitioned to Zoom. But ultimately, we're asking ourselves, we're an ISP, MSP, so managed service provider, and we use a lot of Microsoft tools. Why weren't we using Microsoft tools? And that was a bit of a reflection for us.
Can I just chip in there, Ben, just very quickly? Yeah, it's interesting point Ben raises. Those of you that maybe dabbled in SharePoint and Skype for Business back in the day in the infancy will probably echo Ben's sentiment, and Microsoft have freely held their hands up to it, that back in the day, the tool was not fit for purpose, like frequent synchronization issues and quite poor performance within the Skype environment. And it's quite important to know that since those bad old days, if you had a negative experience of it then, if you try it now, yeah, it's going to be a much sharper experience for you.
I appreciate that context, Mark. So sort of jumping forward to where we find Office 365 and the Microsoft tools pivoted in a good direction, and it's sort of 2019, it was a fully fledged product offering, and there's Teams and Forms and Power Automate and all these cool tools that Mark's touched on earlier. We started to dive a little bit deeper. What started our transition into this modern Microsoft environment is actually our CEO, Sue, was working from Australia, and it changed our requirement to work. So we had to meet regularly and increase our collaboration online. So sort of that's where we entered Teams and started to use it for chat and presence, which took over from Yammer, and just starting to dive into some of these cool technologies. Cool, thank you for that. Cool, so this is just our evolution in Teams and how we sort of stepped through it. Often we find businesses don't know where to start with Teams, or they might use it for one particular purpose. And so our evolution is we started with one-to-one and small meetings, and still use Zoom at the start, which wasn't a perfect solution, and it was just us understanding the tool. What we generally learned is one-to-one meetings worked exceptionally well. It saved a lot of time for our team, and physical rooms where you have to sort of go in, plug in your laptop, and just add time to. The preference was just to jump on a Teams meeting. The natural progression was that everybody would jump on from their individual device with a headset and camera, and that was by far the best speed and quality experience for our team. From that, we actually tested with a group of all staff, and it was sort of just to see what the system was capable of, and got all of our staff to join on a call, and that actually set the standard of what was acceptable. We were really impressed, and now we actually use it fortnightly for all our staff meetings, just to show what the product's actually capable of. But that's sort of just the base of Teams. From there, we started to actually use it for internal meetings and chat and calling it a little bit further. But the progression is the important part, taking it beyond a chat and video calling tool to part of its design. So we started to create teams and channels around sort of existing teams. So we've got the service desk teams, engineering and finance, but also around functions, so health and safety and security. And as we began to use it more, we saw the benefit, and even a benefit around temporary channels, such as internal initiatives and sprints and customer temporary channels and projects.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ben, that when we look at our current Teams environment, we literally just spin up Teams channels for really short, quick hit projects. You know, and at any one time, although it sounds a lot, we're a team of 35 of us, and at any one time there can be upwards of 60, 70 channels running, which sounds like a lot, but when you actually see it in the environment, it means that people only have access to the channels that they are involved in or interested in. So an individual may only have access to 5 or 6 channels, but across the organization, yeah, 50, 60 is not unusual.
Thanks for that, Mark. So jumping in from there, so sort of I've shaped this around SharePoint, but really we've reached the end of our team's evolution where we've got a lot of gain out of it. We're starting to share files and collaborate actively, so using things like co-editing documents at the same time as we're chatting about them and as we're sharing video, which is really cool. So Teams evolved to a key business tool for us in the organisation. Lots of our team join Teams calls and chat from mobile devices, so they can be anywhere around the country. They might be assisting a business or on site, and they can interact with the data as well. But about midway during our Teams adoption, it's worth sort of filling in the SharePoint connection. So we didn't really understand it that well at the start, but about midway through Teams adoption, we could see value. We just had to connect the dots there. So we pulled together an internal team which built SharePoint alongside the team structure, the hub and spoke model, and the data meshed very well and sort of gave our fingertips to all the data we needed for those teams. So we had the organizational teams, the functional teams and project teams, and that data was accessible in SharePoint and in Teams. Use Teams a lot, but it enabled us to collapse a lot of those legacy technologies and tools that I mentioned earlier. So the likes of the Skype for Business, the Zoom, a file server, they're all in one place and people know where to find them. Cool, so jumping through to productivity. So this is really, we've got to use Teams, we've made ourselves quite effective, but these are going a bit further in what you can do in the Microsoft suite. So paper processes was pretty painful for us. In a real sense, people would be given an approval form and it'd just be left on a desk and lost, which is common for paper. You have to sort it, you have to store it somewhere, and it's not a perfect system. So we built automated approvals through forms in Power Automate, and it works exceptionally well. They're tied to SharePoint and Teams, so they're always accessible. People know where to find them, and the expectations just consistent. From there, we start to use tools like Planner and To Do. So Planner is sort of internal project task management, where people can collaborate on tasks that need to be achieved and name them and see them in a board. And To Do is sort of your individual sort of task management that a lot of our team use. All of our computers were transitioned to Azure AD, which means in a simple sense, we didn't need anything like a VPN. There's no connectivity barriers. Our CEO Sue could connect from Australia. Anyone could work from anywhere around New Zealand. All you need is internet and you can access anything we needed to work and do our jobs. Do you want to jump into the next one?
Sure.
Excellent. Cool, and finally that just enhanced our tool sets. Now that we're using the full Microsoft ecosystem, we knew exactly where to find our tools and services. They've arranged in a clean manner and accessible. What we did there just to really tune everything in the Microsoft suite is enroll all our devices in something called autopilot, which means when we get a new employee or a device needs to be refreshed, it's all automatic. As long as the person has a Microsoft credential, the device will set itself up, install our programs, configure all our settings in the same nature. If it needs to be reset, it can be done completely remotely and all by the cloud. One Workplace also sort of controls the data and policy and security. So each identity and endpoint is protected by multi-factor. So we know that this whole ecosystem has got great security behind it.
Okay, so thanks for that, Ben. That was a great story. In terms of where we go next, so I guess probably whilst we've talked a lot about the tools, we've tried not to get too heavily into the technology behind the tools. But I think from an organizational point of view, what are the real benefits that it's going to bring to the table? So first one, you're going to be more connected as a team. Instant messaging, voice, video, collaboration on documentation and files. It's interesting to note that with the files, you can have more than one person working at a time on the same files. It seems a bit strange, but yes, it is possible, and it works really, really well. And that's the collaboration piece we're talking about. Similarly to that, as Ben mentioned, some of the other tools that come in the box, there's a new one being rolled out called Project Mocker, which is going to sit within your Outlook app. And basically that's a kind of light project management tool. Those of you that have used things like Trello will be quite familiar with the way it works, where you have buckets of work and you pass it around. It's just an alternative to Planner or Project, which are quite heavy. If you want something quite light, then Project Mocker is the go-to. It's going to be rolled out soon. I've had a go and I think it's brilliant. Other benefits. You'll find that as you embrace the modern workplace, your reliance on internal email will fall away. From an IT team perspective, we saw an 85% reduction in the amount of email that we send to each other, because the vast majority of our interaction is done via Teams. Similarly, as Ben mentioned, face-to-face meetings have gone pretty much all together, simply because the time taken to actually travel into town, to go to the office, to sit down and have a face-to-face meeting is no longer necessary. So you find that particularly those that did previously have an awful lot of travel involved in their jobs get themselves an awful lot of time back, because literally you can have all these quick hit meetings all over the place. And also, yeah, you actually get more time back because you're not sat in your car. That said, Teams meetings in the car, if you're super busy, are possible. You know, you can go audio only and still make valuable contributions. The work anywhere flexibility, that's really neat, and coupled with the security tools that Microsoft has available in this bundle, can be of real value to you. And we appreciate that as organizations that have security at top of mind, what we call security posture is very important. Now, security posture means a balance between how secure you want to be and how productive you want to be. And what do I mean by that? You could be the most secure organization on the planet, but your users would not be able to get any work done. That's the top and bottom of it. So your security posture is a balance that sits in the middle there somewhere. So it could be a case of, you know, you want people to be able to work anywhere, but if they're not in the office, they have to have multi-factor authentication, which is a sensible one. You know, and your IT provider can work with you to work through that and understand exactly where you want to be and what needs to happen to get you there. But most of the tools available to keep you secure will come with Modern Workplace right out of the box. In terms of governance, we've already talked about that, the data loss prevention. So keeping an eye on your stuff, your data, your files, knowing where they go. Not just personal data, as in data privacy, you can also have a heavier level of control over things that you share externally of your organization. So for example, in the olden days, if you wanted an external collaborator or another organization you work with to see your data, you would literally have to attach it to an email and fire it away. And they would then have a copy of your file. At that point, you've then lost control of that data. The cool thing about SharePoint is if you want to, you can set limits around it. So what do I mean by that? In the new way of working, you don't send anybody an attachment. You literally just send them a link to the actual source file. And what that means is that you then have one single source of truth. You haven't got 7, 8, 9 versions of a document flying around when you're all trying to collaborate on it. So everyone's literally working from the same document. Similarly, you can very heavily control how that document is accessed. If you want to send it externally to your organization, you can put all sorts of restrictions on it, such as this link will only be valid for 48 hours. You could say, this link cannot be forwarded by you, and it works. You cannot print from this link. You know, you cannot edit this link. It's view only. And there's all sorts of cool things on there you can put depending on the trust level of the person you're sending it to, and how much you put value on that data. And finally, as Ben mentioned in the tools part, you can do away with admin-heavy paper-based processes. Like, for instance, in our organization, we found getting access to the company credit card, for example, is a good one. It used to be you'd scribble a piece of paper on a WE form and then leave it on the finance person's in tray. That no longer happens, and we now do a form via Teams. So there's literally a tab in Teams that you can click on, and it has all the company forms in there. You just jump in, you have a look at the form you want, you fill it in, it gets fired off. The finance person gets an email to say, hey, this is awaiting your approval. If they don't approve it within 24 hours, they get another email. If they don't approve it within another 24 hours, they get another email. If that doesn't get affected, then it pings to someone else. And basically it means there's eyes on it all the time, and they don't have to be human eyes. It's the machines doing this. And these are processes that you can set up yourself. You don't have to have any coding knowledge whatsoever. As long as you can take a process and feed it into this system, and you have a logical way of writing it down, non-technical users can create these flows for themselves. It's very intuitive. And as you can imagine, when your team is spread apart, particularly during enforced lockdowns, tools like this can become very cool indeed. Okay, so the next steps in the Microsoft Modern Workplace journey. So as we said at the start from the poll, some of you are just using Microsoft for emails only. Some of you have limited use of OneDrive and SharePoint, and quite a lot of you are in between. Okay, and what I'm about to ask now, these are not technical questions. You just need to ask yourself where you're at now in your journey and how far do you want to go. And what I mean by that is, when you're using the Microsoft stack, the Microsoft Modern Workplace stack, you don't have to invest in all of it. You can literally pick and choose. It's very, very modular. You may be a small organization where you all work in one room of one building, so Teams may not be relevant to you because you literally all talk to each other all day. But on the flip side, SharePoint could be useful for your file storage, as could some of the security features. So literally, it's just looking at your own organization, having an honest look at the way you work, and really I'd encourage you to kind of challenge your status quo, i.e., are you working in that way because that's the way it's always been done, or is there a better way? And there are tools out there. We are somewhat agnostic in so much as if someone came to us and said, hey, I really want to put Google Suite into my organization, we would help them do it. But I must say, overwhelmingly, we've worked with this technology for well over 10 years now, the Microsoft 365 stack, and it really is best in class. And with the heavy donation models that are available to NGOs, where you can either get licensing for free, you get Azure credits, and for some of the more advanced features, you get heavily discounted prices. I think these tools are really worth considering, and I guarantee they will make your boat go faster. Okay, Jane, I think we've got a few minutes left for Q&A. We finished quite early, I think, so yeah, we've still got half an hour of the allotted time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I've just put a link into the chat box for people to have a look at accessing the Microsoft products via Connecting Up. So you can just head over to that page there. We've had one from Brett saying, Microsoft is pitching Windows 365 as a thin client-esque option for delivering services across any device, i.e. Windows PC, Android, iOS, Mac, etc. How might we leverage this, and is there a timeline for our region to have access to Windows 365? How might it fit in with or replace the tools that you've discussed?
It won't necessarily replace them. They'll just be delivered on a different platform. Yeah, and it's a really good question. And the cool thing is, as it's thin client-esque, as you quite correctly said, for those of you on the call that don't know what a thin client is, it's basically a severely stripped down, low resource computer. And effectively what it allows you to do is almost like a virtual desktop for those of you that are used to what that is. So effectively the compute power is done somewhere else in the cloud, and you literally just use your device as a window to access it. ultimately, the way all of this is driving towards is one day we will not need really powerful machines on our desks. There will come a day when you'll literally just bring your phone into work, plug it into the dock, and that your phone will become your device. All these tools are designed to work hand in hand with that. And if we look at some of the early cabs off the rank, like Microsoft Sway, for example, that is the future of PowerPoint, if you like. At this stage, it's not designed to replace PowerPoint, but it is a tool that does exactly what PowerPoint does, but in a completely mobile browser-based environment, designed to open gracefully on any device. And ultimately, that's the way that all of this stuff will go. Any other commentary on that? Probably Ben or John?
Yeah, from my view, there's advantages around the data control in instances, especially with BYOD devices. So there's a bit of a movement that they could use whatever device they want and access this controlled environment from one window, and you hold all the keys. They can't take data out of it, but they can still work to the best of their ability through this new setup. It's starting to roll out. I believe we can access it now, but it's quite new. So like most things, there's some security thoughts and structure as it's set up. But it's definitely a cool technology, which I can see being really useful in the future. From what the best of my knowledge, it's coming in at quite a high price point, and I'm not sure what the benefits or discounts are for the not-for-profit sector. But I guess that's something that will be expanded on as it becomes more widely available.
Happy. Question from Paul. We continue to have issues with OneDrive and SharePoint syncing, sometimes up to 10 hours to achieve sync. Any ideas how to fix this? Oh, sorry. Any ideas how to avoid this?
One for you, Ben.
It really depends on what the case and situation is. Sort of 5 years back, we saw, and I think we touched on in our development and understanding of the product, it was riddled with a few issues, but generally, as if you get a good connection, your device is using the latest version of the client to synchronize it, and there's no limiting factors. Sometimes there is in file name. If all of those protocols are checked off, and yeah, there's sort of a bit of a suite to understand the data, you can relieve most issues pretty easily. Otherwise, I'm sure it's something we could dig in and help with.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, certainly, if you're going to embrace the M365 modern workplace way, often you have to kind of, in your head, slightly set aside the old ways of working. Like, for example, it doesn't play the best using the traditional file explorer method of getting around. It's designed really to be an intranet, so by far the best way of accessing your files is via browser. We find that's the fastest and most responsive. But that said, there shouldn't be like a 10-hour lag on file syncing, Paul. That's something that probably needs to have a quick look at, and we'd be very happy to dig into that with you.
Great, thank you. Kamal is asking, if you were asked for one difference between Google Workplace and Microsoft 365, what would that be?
The one difference for me would be the feature-rich and business-minded aspects of Microsoft, simply because Google, being quite correctly, they're all about the user experience, which is fantastic, and they've made it incredibly simple to get around. But in terms of something that's really fit for business, and you know, as NGOs, I mean, I know technically we're not businesses, but we have to really start thinking like businesses. All those real enterprise class tools that come with it. There's that Google and Microsoft are the two big players on the field, and of the two, yeah, we just believe that the Microsoft stack is far more feature rich than the Google one, particularly around data governance and security.
Okay. Leslie, minor question. Is MS Publisher part of Office 365 as a cloud-based app? I thought it was a desktop app only. Good news if it is both.
That's a very good question. I'll be honest, I haven't used Publisher for quite some time, but yeah, I can't answer that right now, but I can find out for you. If not, it should be. I'm pretty sure it should be. I will double check on that.
I believe it's per license.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah.
Some of the licenses, but I believe it's only offered in a desktop download rather than a web editing version. But sorry, just to add to it.
Yeah, but having said that, your licensing should allow you to install on up to 5 devices, which is cool. So if you use it in the office, you can also use it at home.
Okay. Sandra saying, we are a small organisation, 2 staff, currently desktop based. Within the next 2 months, we have to transition to online. Any recommendation where and how we start the process?
Talk to us, I guess. That would be the first step. I mean, certainly, even if if you've got a clear idea in your head about where you are now and where you're going to, which is great. It sounds like you do, Sandra. I would suggest having a quick look at your environment, seeing how you work now, seeing where your emails sit, seeing where your files sit, and we can literally help you design your SharePoint environment, give you a basic setup, and then from there you can give you the tools and know how to run it yourself. And for a simple 2-user environment, I can't see that being a huge ask. So yeah, we'd be really pleased to have a look into that with you.
Cool. Just Sandra, if you keep an eye on your email at the end of today, we'll include the contact details for IT team. That looks like all the questions. Oh no, another one from Gail. What's the best product for secure document signing, sending documents to people outside the organisation for signing?
If you want something that's got up-to-date legal compliance, the biggest kid on the block at the moment is DocuSign. And I appreciate that does come with a bit of a price tag, but it's by far and away the most secure. If you want something that's a little bit more user-friendly and has a slightly kinder price tag, I'd recommend something like PandaDocs. That would be the way to go.
Excellent, thanks very much. Oh, another one. Hi there. We currently only use Power Automate within SharePoint, but I'm wondering, can it be used across steps in a process that sit within both Teams and SharePoint?
Yes, absolutely. As long as it exists within the Microsoft environment, it can touch any and everything. So yeah, as long as it exists within any of the tools that we've talked about, yeah, it can pull across all areas. No issues at all with that.
Just to add to that, Power Automate does have a desktop function as well, so you can automate anything that can be installed on a Windows computer. I believe it might be extra licensing, but it's built in now.
So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where even if you have tools that don't sit within the Microsoft stack, for instance, if you have, I don't know, a desktop version of a Salesforce tool or something like that, it can actually work with those via scripts.
Okay. Paul is saying, we continue to have issues with the different versions of Office and Excel on the web, causing format issues with documents and spreadsheets to the point of being unusable. Any ideas on how to deal with this?
Commonly we find it...
Sorry, go ahead, Ben. Yeah. No, go for it.
I was just going to say, commonly what we find is if you're using older versions of Office, it's going to cause you a lot of pain. So if it's 2016 or older, that'll be sort of the first inkling. Microsoft has sort of drawn the line of what works well. So compatibility issues. The first recommendation would be to use one of these modern licensing subsets that you'll have access to that should be updated and compatible. That was my bit. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think that's a smart piece of advice. I mean, obviously, with the way the Microsoft licensing is now, it's a monthly subscription model. But the good thing is, you always have access to the latest versions. So yeah, just keep your versioning up to date and see if that's useful.
Great. Another one from Paul. We're migrating to Microsoft 365, but are looking at Dynamics to add CRM and business intelligence and analysis capabilities. Would you recommend Dynamics over MS Modern Workplace?
I guess they kind of serve two different functions, slightly, because Dynamics, you know, for building your ERPs or CRMs or any of those other enterprise level tools, Dynamics is absolutely the way to go. But in terms of everyday office function and productivity, there is still a place in that environment for a modern workplace. What do you reckon, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. Often we find businesses will have both. If they've got a need for that advanced CRM tool or similar functionality, they'll still use Modern Workplace. It's just a section of how your data is handled, and they complement each other at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. One from Jenny. Why is SharePoint OneDrive better than Dropbox?
I think probably the best way to answer that would be if you think of Dropbox as pure document repository with security functions inbuilt, whereas SharePoint is that plus so much other stuff. So you have the full integration with OneDrive, which does a similar job, but you also have the ability to make it look like an intranet. So imagine if you could you know, fully develop your SharePoint environment so that when your users fire up their browser in the morning, they're looking at your team homepage, your team hub, and that can take them off to where they need to go. And depending on how they want to use SharePoint, individual teams can have it looking slightly different to them. So you can have different menus going to different places, completely integrates with everything else. So integrates with all your Office tools, integrates with Teams, integrates with Outlook. And as other tools come on stream, it will integrate with those too. So think of it as keeping everything within one ecosystem. So if you had all your stuff in Dropbox, for example, that's when you start looking at what we called disparate tools. So effectively, you've got tools that exist in two different environments, and you're having to manually drag between the two. With the SharePoint environment, there's no need for that intervention to make stuff work together. It all happens completely seamlessly.
The only thing I'd add to that is, obviously, if everything's in one ecosystem, it gives you more control and data visibility, especially with these new privacy laws, so you understand how your data has been shared and managed and secured. So people are using one set of credentials is an advantage, but obviously everyone's got to weigh out what tool suits them best.
Thank you very much. And another follow-up from Jenny, if we use 365 email, do we still need to have email hosted with our domain name server?
No, you'd need a domain record with your domain provider, but you don't need hosting if it's in Office 365. Is a simple thing.
All your data is held in Exchange Online, so you don't need separate licensing with your domain provider. Literally, as Ben said, all you need to do is every couple of years you'll pay the renewal on your actual domain name itself, whatever your .com.au address is or whatever. And yeah, that will give you access to the back-end records where it will actually repoint everything to your Office 365. But yeah, all the licensing per se is done via Microsoft Exchange Online.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think that's it for the questions. If anybody does have any other questions, please feel free. We've got a few minutes left, or do email us or the IT team and we'll be able to help. So
wonderful.
Thank you very much, Mark and John and Ben, for your webinar today, and thank you everybody for joining us. And do keep an eye on your email inbox, and we'll be sending along the recording and the slides towards the end of today. And if everybody could please take a few moments to fill in the survey, that would be really great. So thanks everybody, have a great day and stay safe. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks, team. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.